Hello, my name's Jonathan Weber. I'm the Deputy Director of Florida Conservation Voters, and I was just getting my mail. I'm a big fan of the U.S. Postal Service, and boy, do they provide a wonderful thing here for all of us Americans to enjoy. It's a mail. Check it out. It's like a IRS. No thanks. Um, some kind of foundation. No thanks. Oh, cool, free return envelopes. I mean, return stamps. That's awesome. I love those things. And looks like a bill. I'll put that down there. But anyway, I am here today to talk to you about another great service that the mail people can provide for us. It's called Vote by Mail, and what a wonderful thing that is. But you may be wondering, like, kind of what's going on with Vote by Mail these days. It's been in the news. You might have seen it on one of the cable news networks, or heard people talking about it on a radio station, or certainly it's been all over Twitter, which is a ridiculous website. But you might have seen something about it. So we're going to talk a little bit about today and why it's important, and what are some things that you can do to participate in Vote by Mail if you so choose. Before we get going here, I do just want to say thank you to everyone who is helping out during this ridiculous kind of pandemic crisis we're in right now. I know it's hard for everyone, but especially for our frontline workers, hospital workers, everyone helping out to keep people fed and happy and healthy as much as possible. So thank you all to that. If there's anything that FCV can do to help anyone, of course, please let us know. We're available in any way we can. Certainly, as we move ahead to the next legislative session, we will be taking your comments and what you're interested in to the Capitol. So you keeping us informed is exactly what you need to do. So let us know what's going on in your neighborhood, in your neck of the woods, and I'm happy to bring that to the Capitol when I lobby. But right now I am here at my house in Tallahassee, Florida, enjoying the beautiful weather we have. It might be the last beautiful weather we have before it starts to get swelteringly hot for Florida, but we're Floridians, we're used to it, we know how to handle it. Anyway, so thank you. Please keep in touch on that. But what is vote by mail? What is it? So vote by mail refers to voting a ballot received by mail or picked up by or for a voter instead of going to the polls to vote during the early voting period or on election day. Except on election day, no excuse is needed to vote a vote by mail ballot. Unless otherwise specified, a request to receive a vote-by-mail ballot covers all elections through the end of the calendar year for the second ensuing regularly scheduled general election. A vote-by-mail ballot that is returned undeliverable cancels a request for future elections and must be renewed. So that's vote-by-mail. Simply put, you get your ballot in the mail, and you can fill it out in the comfort of your own home, in your lazy boy chair as you're watching the evening news, or whatever it may be. Personally, I have actually never voted by mail. I need to. I should do it. I've always liked voting at my local early voting location or at my local polling place on election day. It's right here in my neighborhood in Tallahassee. I love it. My neighbors work the polls usually, so I get to see them. And let's get real, we don't really talk to our neighbors nearly enough. None of us do. But one thing, certainly when I was younger, for sure, you'd walk into the polling place, you get your ballot, you go into the ballot box, and you look at your ballot, and you're going through, and it's like, oh, president, I know that one, bingo, got that guy. Go down there, oh, U.S. Senate, I know all about this, I want that guy. Okay, state senate, all right, I know who I want for state senate, I got him. And state rep, I met her at the library one time, and I'm voting for her. I like her a lot. And then you start getting a little bit lower, and you're like, oh, maybe I didn't do enough homework before I came into the ballot box. Maybe I don't know what to vote here. And so you start feeling like a little pressured, right? That ballot box pressure that we've all felt a little bit is that maybe I didn't do enough research on this candidate. So what do you do when you don't know who to vote for? Either you leave it blank and you get nervous, or you just don't know what to do and like I'm going to vote for the woman. You just don't know what to do. You get nervous. A great solution to that is being able to vote by mail at home, which means you can open up your computer, you can calm yourself, there's no one waiting behind you, you don't have to go to work or something later or go pick up your kids or whatever it may be. You have the time to actually think through each selection you make. So that's why I really like vote by mail. And now as we enter this kind of different world where voting may be a health hazard, like voting in person, vote by mail is certainly an option that I'm looking into, and I would say there's a very good chance that my wife and I will definitely do that for the coming election, the primary in August and the November general election. We just have to do it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why vote by mail has triggered this partisan battle ahead of November's election. It has been kind of ugly in Washington, D.C., as is typical, but about vote by mail, this one kind of set me off a little bit. I am a strong advocate for voting rights, and I believe that every eligible citizen of the United States should be able to vote easily and comfortably without the threat of intimidation or violence or health or anything like that. It should be easy and it shouldn't take hours and hours to do. And I believe that firmly. I don't care what party you're from or where you live or what you're doing, or it doesn't matter to me. If you're eligible and you're a citizen, you should vote and be able to vote easily. So when I hear arguments about vote by mail being bad, it sets me off a little bit. So I'm going to read a little bit from a story that was published by Reuters. It's kind of talking about what's going on right now in D.C. and kind of the national discussion on vote by mail. So the drive to expand vote by mail options during the coronavirus pandemic has emerged as the centerpiece of a growing political fight ahead of November's election. President Donald Trump and his Republican allies have attacked the idea of expanding mail balloting, arguing it is vulnerable to fraud and openly worrying that easier voting would hurt their party's chances in November. Democrats and voting rights groups say that it is a way to protect voters from the deadly virus, and that a failure to guarantee that option amid a pandemic will disenfranchise millions of Americans, especially the poor and African Americans who are deemed more vulnerable to the virus and who tend to vote Democratic. Last week's turbulent Wisconsin elections, which went ahead after Republicans blocked Democratic efforts to delay in-person voting and expand absentee balloting, illustrated the partisan divide and the mounting urgency to find a solution before the November 3rd U.S. election. So here are the key issues surrounding the vote by mail debate right now. So what is behind the opposition? Republicans say that voting by mail is more susceptible to fraud since voters do not have to appear in person at a polling place. Donald Trump said, mail ballots are a very dangerous thing for this country because they're cheaters. They go and collect them. They're fraudulent in many cases, Trump told a recent coronavirus briefing, without providing evidence. He acknowledged he cast an absentee ballot by mail last month in Florida's Republican primary. But Trump also voiced that Democrats believe is the prime motivation for opposing vote by mail. It will lead to a higher turnout that hurts Republican candidates. Trump told Fox News a shift to making voting easier would mean you'd never have a Republican elected in this country again. Trevor Potter, a Republican former chairman of the Federal Election Commission, who founded the Washington-based Campaign Legal Center, said Trump's reaction was puzzling since Republicans often do well in mail-in balloting. Polls show older Americans, those thought to be most vulnerable to the virus, are more likely to support President Trump than the other voters, Potter said, adding conservative Utah is one of 5 states that has gone to all mail voting with little sign of fraud. So is fraud really a concern? So there's been a series of academic and government and news investigations over the years, and they have found little evidence of election fraud of any kind. Election fraud. Utah and 4 other states that vote entirely by mail, which is Hawaii, Oregon, Washington, and Colorado, have reported little fraud. Trump, who has often said without evidence that millions voted illegally in 2016, formed a commission after the campaign to investigate. Maybe you remember that. It disbanded in January 2018 without finding any evidence to back up his allegations. Elections experts say there have been scattered incidents of people collecting and manipulating absentee ballots in a process known as ballot harvesting. The most recent example came in 2018 in North Carolina congressional race, the outcome of which was overturned when it was determined an operative gathered ballots for the Republican candidate. Arguments for voting by mail. So more than a dozen states have already postponed primaries or expanded vote by mail to avoid forcing residents to go to crowded polling places, which would be a danger. Vote by mail is hardly a novelty. A report by the U.S. Election Assistance Commission says that process was used by about 1/4 of all voters in the 2018 midterm elections. Along with 5 states that vote entirely by mail, 28 states will allow voters to request a mail ballot without any excuse in November, according to the Brennan Center for Justice. We are not reinventing the wheel here. This is upscaling of what is already taking place, U.S. Senator Ron Wyden, co-sponsor of fellow Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar of a bill to expand vote by mail and early voting to all states, told reporters last week. So what are the hurdles to vote by mail? There are still 17 states, such as Texas, New York, Louisiana, that would need to change their policies to guarantee that everyone who wants to vote by mail in November can, the Brennan Center said. It will be expensive. The Brennan Center estimated that the cost of ensuring the vote by mail was available for all voters could be up to $1.4 billion, with postage alone costing up to $600 million. Even advocates of vote by mail say states would need to keep the option of in-person voting for voters with disabilities, those who need language access assistance, or do not have regular mail access. So what are the key legal battles? Democrat and Republican-aligned groups across the country are already fighting in federal and state courts over whether and how to expand access to mail-in voting. On March 30th, 27 New Mexico county clerks petitioned the state Supreme Court to conduct their June 2nd primary almost entirely by mail and allow all voters to be mailed an absentee ballot. State Republicans sued to oppose both changes. In Texas, the Democratic Party sued the state's Republican leadership in federal court on April 7th to allow no-excuse absentee ballot voting. Texas law requires voters to provide an excuse, such as disability, when requesting an absentee ballot. In Georgia, our friendly neighbor to the north, only about half an hour from my house or so, the American Civil Liberties Union sued the Republican Secretary of State last Wednesday in federal court for requiring voters to pay their own postage when submitting mail-in absentee ballots and applications, arguing that it was tantamount to a poll tax. So, let's move on to a little overview of vote by mail in the world we're in now. The COVID-19 pandemic makes it imperative that states protect voters by moving to vote by mail systems for all their elections. Hundreds of organizations and individuals, including in a letter from the Leadership Council on Civil and Human Rights and signed by more than 200 organizations, have come out in support of vote by mail for the 2020 elections because people shouldn't have to put their health and health of their community at risk in order to vote. In-person voting violates all of the tenets of social and physical distancing, putting communities and especially poll workers at risk. Again, poll workers, these are my neighbors, these are my friends, these are people that we see, every hurricane, but we care about them very much. Furthermore, urging people to vote in a way that puts their lives at risk is dangerous, and neglecting to give voters a safe way to vote is voter suppression. Vote by mail, sometimes called vote at home, keeps voters safe from spreading COVID-19 and has a long history of increasing turnout by making it easier for people to vote. In past elections, VBM states have consistently have higher voter turnout. A couple of examples. In the 2018 general election, 3 VBM states, Colorado, Oregon, and Washington, all ranked in the top 7 for highest turnout. And the 4th VBM state, Utah, had the highest increase in turnout from 2014 of any state. VBM especially increases turnout in primaries and for down ballot races because with the convenience of voting at home, voters don't have to wait in line at a polling place and can take their time researching candidates when voting, which is like, that ballot box stress is something I wish I could get rid of, and we could all just sit down and look at the newspaper or look at our online information and figure out what candidates actually represent them best, or take a BuzzFeed quiz, whatever you want to do. In Colorado, after the state implemented VBM, participation increased by 9% for Coloradans aged 18 to 34, and after Denver implemented its vote-by-mail program in 2001, it experienced a significant increase in voter participation among Latinos. A 2018 report examining voting behavior in Utah during the 2016 elections found that voter participation increased by 5 to 7 percentage points in the 21 counties using vote at home rather than traditional polling places. So, vote by mail is really important and really good, and we should all be considering it, especially in the COVID-19 pandemic that we're in right now. So how do you request a vote by mail it yourself? So in Florida, again, this is information that's just for Florida, so you happen to be watching me from, Guam or American Samoa or Washington State, like you can ignore this part because your laws are going to be different, but hopefully a lot of you watching are in Florida. So if you want to request a ballot, you can do it in one of the following ways. You can do the online application, which you can Google search Florida voter registration form, or you can go to your county supervisor of elections website. So type in your county name. I live in Leon. Type in Leon, supervisor of elections. You'll find the website in about, a second, and you'll be able to find usually there's going to be a button to click, or there'll be a phone number to call, or something that you can email or figure out, and you can figure out how to get this process to happen. It's not hard. It just takes a minute of your time. You can also do it by writing, and the Division of Elections website says you can do it by email, fax. You can fax in your request. So those of us who have fax machines, you got to blow the dust off that and send a fax into the Supervisor of Elections, or of course mail. You can do it with mail, regular mail. And you can use a return address. sticker to the supervisor of elections. You can, of course, just pop into your SOE's office and tell them what you want to do, or you can just pick up the phone and call your supervisor and ask them on the phone to please switch to vote by mail. To make a request, the following information is required: the name of the voter from whom the ballot is being requested, your address, the date of birth, and the voter's signature if the request is written. If an immediate family member or legal guardian is requesting a vote-by-mail ballot for a voter, the following additional information must be provided: the requester's address, the requester's driver's license number if available, the requester's relationship to the voter, and the requester's signature if the request is written. So the deadline to request that a vote-by-mail ballot be mailed is no later than 5 p.m. on the 10th day before the election. Okay, let me say that again. The deadline to request that a vote-by-mail ballot be mailed is no later than 5 p.m. on the 10th day before the election. However, the ballot must still be received by the supervisor of elections of your county no later than 7 p.m. on election day if the voted ballot is to count. Exceptions exist for overseas military and civilian voters, so that's a little bit different. But again, if you're just want to do normal vote by mail from the comfort of your own home, you better make sure you get that ballot in by election day, 7 p.m. Right? Okay, so that's settled. So here's where it gets a little interesting. So who can pick up a vote by mail ballot? Excuse me. A voter can pick up their own vote by mail ballot at any time once the ballot becomes available, including on election day. However, the voted ballot must be returned and received by the supervisor of elections office no later than 7 p.m. on election day. Other return options are available for military and overseas voters. A voter can designate someone else to pick up their ballot. The designation must be authorized in writing. For example, my mother, when she was ill, back, I forget how long, maybe 15 years ago, whatever it was, she got very sick. She couldn't she had to request her own vote by mail thing. And it was a complicated little process there, I remember, to get it to happen, but we got it and it worked out and we were able, yeah, I remember now, yeah, so we were able to submit her ballot fine, no problems, we got it in on time. I think I remember it was right down to the wire though. I think I submitted it on election day, if I remember correctly, for her. Boy, that was a long time ago now. I think that was the 2004 election, I don't remember. Anyway, the earliest a designee can pick up a voter's ballot is 9 days before election day. A designee is limited to picking up vote-by-mail ballots for 2 other voters per election, not including their own ballot and the ballots for immediate family members. The designee must submit an affidavit to pick up the voter's blank ballot. There's affidavits online. You can find them on the Division of Elections website. Okay, so if a voter or designee waits until election day to pick up or have delivered a vote-by-mail ballot, the election day vote-by-mail ballot delivery affidavit must also be completed. So getting it done ahead of time is the best option here, if you can pull it off. The voter must affirm that an emergency exists that keeps the voter from being able to vote at his or her assigned polling place. So how to vote a vote-by-mail ballot. Instructions are included with the vote-by-mail ballot. The voted ballot must be returned and received by the supervisor of elections no later than 7 p.m. on election day. If a voter decides to go to the polls to vote instead of voting by mail, the voter should bring the vote-by-mail ballot, marked or not, okay? So if you're like, hey, you know what, I do want to go see my neighbors. I haven't seen, Kathy in a while. Let me go down there, and I like seeing her. Maybe there's, the parks nearby. Go for a walk too. Bring your ballot. I don't care if it's half done, totally done, signed, ready to go. Bring it with you, okay? The vote-by-mail ballot will be canceled, and the voter can vote by a regular ballot at the polls, but you got to bring it with you. So don't lose it or misplace it or whatever it is, okay? If the voter comes to the polls without the vote-by-mail ballot, the voter can vote a regular ballot if the supervisor of elections office can confirm that it has not yet received the voter's vote-by-mail ballot, okay? But don't leave it up to chance because, election day is usually hectic for supervisors of elections, certainly in the big counties like Broward, where I grew up, or Miami-Dade, or Orange, Hillsborough, Pinellas, you name it, even Leon, a bunch of people here. You don't want to give them the extra burden on election day, only if you don't have to. However, if a voter believes that he or she has not already voted, he or she shall be allowed to vote with a provisional ballot, which of course is a temporary ballot until they can solve the problem at a later date, and then your vote will count down the road if everything works out. So a vote-by-mail voter may drop off a voted vote-by-mail ballot at a designated secure drop box at early voting sites in the election. Please contact your local supervisor of elections or refer to their website for the location of all the vote-by-mail ballot secure drop boxes in your county. So here's another problem that comes up with vote by mail. It's solvable, fixable, but we can fix it. We can make this work. Is that oftentimes you'll find that your signature might not match the signature on your vote by mail ballot. So if a voter is notified that he or she did not sign a vote by mail ballot certificate, or that the signature on the certificate does not match the signature on record, the voter may complete and return a vote by mail ballot cure affidavit with a copy of identification. The deadline to submit the form and the ID is no later than 5 p.m. on the second day after an election. Failure to follow the instructions may cause the ballot not to be counted. So this is something where you have to spend a little bit extra urgency to make sure that your ballot counts, okay? So how to track your vote by mail ballot request and returned ballot. So any voter who has requested a vote by mail ballot can track online the status of his or her ballot through a link within the Division of Elections voter information lookup or through their County Supervisor of Elections website. If a voter's registration information is protected pursuant to statute, the voter will need to contact the Supervisor of Elections office about the status of the vote by mail ballot request. So that is basically everything you need to know about vote by mail. I'm getting a question from Peter Schorsch, our good friend. What is the big brown thing in the tree over my right shoulder? Oh, that is, I think it's a squirrel's nest, but I don't want to bother them at all. I like the squirrels. So thank you, Peter. People don't like squirrels. I know this guy around here, he's like a BB gun. Not a BB, like a pellet gun, and he shoots the squirrels in his front yard, and I don't like that guy. That guy, not welcome around here. Okay, so that's about all I have. If you have any other questions, even I can show you around my yard, Peter, if you like. We can do a tour of my invasive species that are taking over, my coral ardesia that I'm desperately trying to rip out. We can do that too. Okay. I'll leave it for any more questions, and I'll move on. All right, thank you all so much. Again, if you have any questions, please let me know. I hope you're all doing very well again, like I said. And stay safe, let's take care of each other, and I will see you down the road.